Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals Public Review Session for August 13th, 2018. We'll begin with appeals items, new cases. Item number 1, 2018-127A, 20-08 Demarest Road, Queens. This is a Build It Back case.
Right. So this is actually a GCL 36 waiver, which we haven't seen in a while for a Build It Back project. And so in that case, we need fire department and DOT sign off, which we received. A portion of this house sits within a street widening line. So that's it. It doesn't require a special permit. Well, not yet.
Also, they're requesting a waiver.
Yes.
Well, bulk waivers to the extent that they would have had to move the building back but for the street widening, but then what you do is you look at the property line and you look to see whether it complies with respect to the property line.
And it's not within a capital improvement area.
Which is what DOT's sign-off said. And they're also looking for a waiver of BSA rules. Right.
Special order calendar, decision items. Item number 2, 210-13BZ, 43-12 50th Street, Queens.
So one of the things we talked about last time was, last hearing, was about illegal signs, and they're saying that they need to get a permit to remove the signs. And this is an extension for time to obtain a CFO, but there's a lot of things that they didn't do. So I'm wondering what people think about holding off on a decision until they remove the signs, or just putting this on a short leash and saying you have to come back within X months to show us that you did all the things you're supposed to do.
I think I'm fine with the latter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Continued hearings. Item number 3, 7-57BZ, 2317 Ralph Avenue, Brooklyn.
They requested an adjournment to complete the work. And anyway, what the real answer is probably is the applicant's out of the country and can't show up at this hearing. But they did have physical work that needed to be completed, even though the last time we saw them was in April.
Item number 4, 624-68BZ, 188-07 15 Northern Boulevard, Queens.
They requested an adjournment.
Item number 5, 2016-4150BZ, 667 Grand Street, Brooklyn.
They also requested an adjournment.
New cases. Item number 6, 30-58BZ, 184-17 Horace Harding Expressway, Queens.
Okay, we have proof of service of initial application and of notice of hearing to officials, but I didn't find the community board recommendation, and that recommendation is particularly necessary in this case. It always is, but in this case, because the site was put on a short leash due to concerns about maintenance, even though the images of the site look good, and I don't know if anyone's had a chance yet to visit the site. Okay, so we'll hear more. And then a new gas dispenser is proposed to be added that's located adjacent to the convenience store, which is a proposal also to change the automotive repair to a convenience store. So what I'm not sure about is whether gas dispensers are actually permitted to be so close to a building. This is really close, like 3 feet away from the building. And also, wouldn't its location so close to the building where you've got a car now driving up right against the curb impede pedestrian circulation at the front door of the convenience store? And in this case, there'd be 2 lanes of cars side by side without an island in between. So then you have both that pedestrian circulation issue and then car doors swinging at the same time. It seems, I'm not sure whether that's like a standard thing when you have such a tight gas station. On big gas stations, you have plenty of room for the car doors to swing and all of that. And often they stripe the area for the pedestrians to walk. I don't know that there's room for this. Also, they are proposing to eliminate a long part of the wraparound sidewalk that wraps around the building and replace that with bollards. I don't really understand why they're proposing to do that. Others?
Where did you see that portion, the bollard?
Yeah, so there was a sidewalk that goes much further in,
Right.
and they're cutting it short and then putting bollards for pedestrians.
Yeah.
Why would you do that?
Well, none of
Anything
the-
you'd extend the sidewalk.
Well, there isn't any entrance. I actually saw this and I thought, well, the entrance is not from the Horace-Arding. So, isn't it?
The entrance
No,
is wherever
actually it
you,
is. It is.
there's parking spaces over on the right. So,
So this is where the existing is.
right, so if you park there, then the front door is after the pumps, right? So you have to walk all into those bollards, and then I assume it's a sliding door, that's why
It is
you
a
don't see
sliding
it
door.
swing.
Yeah.
Automatic sliding door, that's pretty typical, right? And so you're walking from there or from your car that's at the pump. And so how do you get there if there's, all the cars are lined up in front of all the pumps?
Yeah, I agree with you. It should be extended to, at least to where the sliding door opens up, and remove those bollards. I'm not sure if that was meant to protect the pedestrians. I don't know if there's enough space for pedestrian to maneuver between that and the space remaining. And they should provide some dimension.
They need
Yeah.
to dimension all of the site because you need to know that there's clearance
Yeah.
with the parking spaces to get to that new dispenser as well as, like you said, passage space between the new dispenser and the old dispenser. They also need to show compliance with the TPPN, and they don't do that in the statement. Talk about the square footage of selling space and how it complies. And they should break.
10 of 88, right?
Yeah. And they
10 of
sh-
99.
10 of 99.
One of those numbers.
And they should also break out their signage by frontage.
Chair, I have a comment about the community board. So the land use committee will be holding a meeting for this case on August 23rd.
Okay,
And the full board will be September 12th.
okay, August 23rd and September 12th. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Item number 7, 340-04BZ, 1579 Forest Avenue, Staten Island.
All right. We have proof of service of initial application and of notice of hearing to officials. Community Board recommended conditional approval with 27 in favor and 1 opposed, and the condition was a motion to approve with conditions that the ADA increase to 3 spots, ADA parking increase to 3 spots, and the waiver issued be specific to the proposed operator, Top Tomato, and rethinking the location of the refuge staging to Forest Avenue perimeter. They also need, from my review, they need photos to establish that the landscaping, pedestrian pathway, and fencing complies with the approved plans. The existing drawings show much less planting than what was approved. And whether or not we agree to this further parking reduction, the site improvements and the planting have to be done before we vote, since the site appears to be out of compliance with the grant, in spite of the applicant's signed statement to the contrary. So here we go again. We have a person signing, confirming that the site is in compliance when it clearly isn't. It takes 5 minutes to learn that it's not in compliance, so why do you sign a paper? And by the way, those papers are supposed to be signed and sealed by an architect or engineer, but not by the council, not by the attorney, unless the attorney wants to affirm or something like that. And that means a license, that means swearing. I'd like a note to our council. There's apparently an error in the resolution that was issued on this, with respect to the required amount of parking, which is shown on the drawings as 38 spaces, not 39, just so
So the
you're
correct
aware.
is 38 spaces.
38, and there's a mistake in the resolution, and you can see on the drawings it's
Okay.
39. So I'd also like to know, what is the DEC required station, that's in quotes, referred to on the approved plans? It's not any longer shown on the existing drawings, so maybe it was a monitoring location and it's been removed, but they didn't mention it anywhere. This was a variance to reduce the required parking for a Category B use to effectively half of what was required. The hardship was the inability to provide a cellar based on subsurface conditions. That was the minimum variance. Parking Category B is the most common of the parking categories for retail use in Use Group 6, and was a logical choice for this variance as it permitted the most flexibility for future uses. In fact, out of the more than 70 Use Group 6 retail uses, only 7 uses, including docks, post offices, meeting halls, and carpet and furniture stores, have a different category. Carpet and furniture stores that are parking category B-1 have the same requirements as parking category B in this zoning C41 district. So I'm having trouble actually finding that the minimum variance really wasn't the minimum. With respect to the parking utilization studies, and not only that it wasn't the minimum, and if you change it to the proposed, then you're not going to be able to change it to anything else without coming back to the BSA again, and then we'll have to look at, then you have to come back for a hearing again because it's completely changing the category, right? And the category they're proposing requires more parking spaces, a lot more, actually. With respect to the parking utilization studies that are based on other sites, the Bay Street and the Amboy Road Top Tomatoes sit within larger shopping centers. So wouldn't people park outside the supermarket lot also? You know, they would just walk, they'd park someplace else and run over to the market to get a little something and then get in their cars that's parked someplace else. A July 2017 Google Street View of the subject site actually showed the site's parking lot nearly full, even though the store was closed with a for rent sign on it. So it's obvious that people are using that as overflow parking from the other commercial uses that are right around there, but there's like a wall between, great. There's a wall between the adjacent parking lot and this one, so it may be not as obvious that someone would park in the other lot in order to come to this lot, except that there was a pedestrian pathway that the prior board requested be installed, presumably to pick up some of the people who are parking in other locations. I'd like to know also where the backup data is to show that the peak periods that they use for the utilization study are in fact the peak periods for shopping centers in this particular census tract that is so car-centric. They just said those are the peak periods without giving us any backup information. Other comments?
I was just curious as to why the community board wants to relocate the refuse from the center of the lot. I don't know if the applicant could speak to that, but it seemed like it's a fine place to locate it.
Right. But with respect to this minimum variance question and the B, what are the, my problem is you've got almost every available use group 6 use in a B category. And even a B1 category where I could see, all right, we could expand it to allow a B1, but there's no difference between a B1 and a B, so then we wouldn't need to look at utilization rates or anything. It doesn't double the required parking. So when they say they want to rent to a food store, that's nice, but there's so many other, what is it, furniture stores, what do you call it, sporting goods stores. There's like so many other kind of shopping mall type stores that are fitting within the B or the B1 category.
It might be helpful if they gave us a history as to their attempts to market the site or other forms of retail.
Okay. Any other comments on this?
I was wondering if it wasn't quite clear from the parking study, and so I wanted them to confirm that if the peak demand can be accommodated on the site.
Yeah, they actually said it was quite a low demand, like 20-something spaces at the peak,
I didn't.
and they have 30-something spaces.
So I found that very hard to believe considering the size of this Top Tomato and knowing the other locations and how much use they do get, that their parking demand would be so minimal. And I also viewed the Google Maps and saw that the site, while it was being advertised for leasing, still had a relatively full lot.
Right.
And so, to me, that tells me that the community needs parking. And while they can certainly cut off it for only Top Tomato use, as they do in other locations, it begs the question of, can this other use be sustained with the limited parking there?
I'm just a little concerned with the question both Chair and Commissioner Shibata just raised. I mean, yes, the current site is vacant and it is being used by some other user who's parking, or the residents, whoever, we don't know, that is using this parking space as an overflow parking area. Okay, but that doesn't mean that the proposed use it's the proposed use responsibility, even if it was an as-of-right development. It's not the it's that development responsibility to provide parking for the overflow of another use. So I think we need to review the parking requirement of this development as it would require in an as-of-right, and the variance that is being, and the modification that is required. I'm not comfortable with trying to analyze it. There is an overflow, that means there is a parking demand. Yes, that particular use may have more parking, may have more patrons coming, and they don't have sufficient amount of parking. But that doesn't necessarily mean that this development will have that and is also obligated to provide the overflow of other use. So I just want to be clear on
I
that.
understand that, and I agree, but the only issue is, I think that the reason the utilization rates apparently are low is because these sites are located within kind of larger commercial zones where you're right next to the parking lot of another use. So when they're looking at utilization rates, I'm thinking the utilization rates are not reflecting the actual demand on site, because what they're doing is they're looking at other Top Tomatoes in Staten Island, all of which are part of shopping centers. So as opposed to looking at sort of a clean analysis of how many shoppers are there at a given time, how many people in the census tract use cars, that kind of thing, which is a more typical study, right? Because this way, I'm looking at it, well, they're all parking over in front of the Walmart, and then they realize, oh, I need milk, and then they run over to the Top Tomato, or I need tomatoes, and they run over there, and then they get in the car that's parked in front of Walmart. So that's the concern I have. So it has to play both ways, right? Mm-hmm. So I think they need to do a clean parking study where it's not based on who parks at the current Top Tomatoes, but how you do a study for a supermarket in this census tract when you don't have existing comps.
And
right?
also they use two other Top Tomato sites as comparable.
Right.
And I would like to know how those two sites and its adjacent uses and others compare to it when one is using that comparison. Because that site may be part of a larger shopping complex.
Well, that's what I was
That's
saying.
exactly
That's
what
what they
you're
are.
saying.
Both of them are
Okay.
part of a larger
Yeah.
shopping complex.
Right.
And the difference is that those have, their parking lots are very on the same level and adjacent, so you can
Right.
walk really
You can walk,
easily.
right.
This one, there's a wall
Stand.
and a level change between the adjacent lot and this lot.
Mm-hmm.
You can still walk, but you might not look at it as, oh, look, they're connecting parking
Right.
lots.
It
right?
was not, from the Google Street View, didn't look like they were connected.
No, they're not connected.
Right, but there is a pedestrian connection, I couldn't locate it.
No, there's a pedestrian walk that takes you to the sidewalk. So it assumes that somebody will park in the other lot and then walk to the sidewalk and then walk in.
Okay.
Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but it's a less of an obvious connection of the parking lots.
Okay.
Okay. Did you want to say something else?
No, I was just referring, in response, I would say that I was reviewing the cars in the lot as it's indicative of there not being other options of parking in the area, and that we should pay particular attention to parking because of there not going to be many on-street parking or other parking because they're already using this lot, whether or not appropriately.
Right. Well, and that, what's interesting about that is simply that it's probably an inconvenient place to park for the people who are parking there because they have to walk to whatever the
Across the street,
destination
seems like.
is. And it would be much easier if they were at that destination, right? So it indicates that people are willing to even park inconveniently when they can't find what they need right in front of whatever the retail source is.
Okay. Item number 8,
Just a second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Item number 8, 163-165-14A, 502, 504, 506 Canal Street, Manhattan. This is a compliance hearing.
Yeah. So I'm sorry that Tony isn't here today because she would fill in some of my comments. But so this is a compliance hearing to ensure that flood management controls are being implemented as required by the board when it permitted these 3 existing historic buildings to convert, it's actually a legalization, the first floor from retail to residential use to allow for townhouse occupancy in each one of these 3 buildings in spite of the fact that the first floors are below base flood elevations. The board was extremely concerned about this and reluctant with this application, so imposed a lot of restrictions on the property owner. And for instance, I think there were flash flood warnings this weekend and even maybe today. And according to that, whenever there's a flash flood warning, the property owner is required by the board to prepare these flood shields, which are a very elaborate installation and expensive to install, which they're supposed to be keeping at a building nearby. So they showed us that tenants were notified of this hearing because a big part of the concern was the potential, the impact on tenants if the floodwaters rose to above the base flood elevation, and both damage to their possessions and damage to the interior, at which point they would have to be evacuated for repairs, et cetera. So the owner provided proof that it initiated floodgate and flood shield installation and tenant notification on days when there were flood warning events. But there were other provisos and conditions that we need to have proofs on, and we didn't get those. So if you read our resolution, it's very, very long and very detailed. It includes verbatim the restrictive declaration that was recorded, that should have been recorded against the property, as well as emergency evacuation plan details. So it's easy to kind of follow along and see what was required to have been done and proven to us. So they need to provide the following: proof that the restrictive declarations were recorded against each of the properties, copies of the current leases with the tenants' names and rents redacted, but showing the terms of the lease with required riders signed by the landlord and the tenant, copies of flood insurance certificates for all buildings showing coverage amounts for flood damage, copies of certificate of occupancies for all buildings, photos showing the emergency action plan is still posted in the entryway or mailrooms of each of the buildings. Proof that the landlord has established and funded an escrow account for each building as required in the resolution, which I believe is $25,000 per building. Affidavits from the tenants about the procedures, the evacuation procedures and the sort of building close down procedures, and information about any damage that may have occurred within their units as a result of or following the flood emergency. So those were all, this is kind of a conditional approval, very conditional, that until we see that this is actually working in the event of a high water event. And at the moment, I don't know if we've experienced any actual high water events, though I saw that the Hudson River Parkway was flooded. But I don't know that it went high enough to reach this base flood elevation. I think here we're like a foot and a half or something below base flood. So I don't know what that meant in terms of that part of the street. Any other comments on this one?
I'd like to know I'd second the information about any damage that occurred at the property and what was.
Can you go closer to
Sorry.
your mic, because we really can't hear
I'd
you.
like to, I'd second the information about any damage that occurred on the property, and I'd like to know what was done to remedy that damage, or if it's a reoccurring issue or not, and if there is damage, if they have a plan to address it. I really would appreciate if the tenants do come, but we don't
Yeah.
have any.
That's why we ask for affidavits, because tenants have to take a day off from work and so on to come here. But just because you weren't here were you here for that? Yeah, okay. So you weren't here for this one. It's a pretty intense thing. So the cellar level, which is below base flood, has a crawl space. And the crawl space is really, maybe it's 2.5 feet high, so you really are you're crawling around like a crab when you're underneath there. And what Commissioner Montanez insisted they do in order to deal with, there's an issue when you fill up a cellar that's below flood elevation, as the waters rise, there's a concern about lifting the entire structure as a result of the rising. So you don't want to have a lot of volume of water underneath there. So what she insisted they do is basically fill most of the cellar with concrete so that there are just these little pathways underneath, so that there's less volume of water below. However, and even in a flood situation like yesterday, where the waters probably rose in the cellar, then you have issues about mildew, for example. I don't know there, since everything's concrete, what mildews, but concrete takes a long time to dry when it's not exposed to heat sources, right? So you could get all kinds of unpleasant smells, for example. And there is ventilation that was part of the requirement as well, but we don't know how any of this is going to play out. This was quite an experiment. We did this very reluctantly because the owner had basically occupied the units illegally. So we were kind of backing our way into a solution, which was quite unpleasant. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was hoping for Commissioner Shetta's insight on the basement issue from the notes I read.
Say
I was
I'm
hoping
sorry.
for Commissioner Shetta's assessment of the flooding issues and how they addressed them. It seemed pretty intense from what I read.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Item number 9, continued hearings on the appeals calendar. Item number 9, 238-15A through 243-15A, 102-04, 08, 12, 16, 20, 24 Dunson Court, Queens.
So I'm a little frustrated with this application. At the last, not a little, actually a lot. At the last hearing, we were as clear as day and stated our instructions repeatedly, and it wasn't just instructions coming from me and other commissioners, it was from Tony Matias, it was from Carlos Costanza. Many people said the same thing. The applicant was to provide us with a cover letter going over and answering every question that we had at the December hearing, which was the last time we actually heard this application. And also the June review session, which was the last time we didn't really have a hearing. We just said, you're not prepared with anything. The applicant's representative, the architect, came, and we went over what we had said in the December hearing and said you need to listen to the December hearing, the June review session, and the hearing, and answer every single question and have a cover letter that explains how you're doing it. And they were also supposed to supply us with a revised HOA and a restrictive declaration, which I do understand was submitted, though not properly. So I wasn't really able to review it, but I'm looking at it now. The HOA needed to address the maintenance of the entirety of the Dunton Court roadbed, utilities, and street trees, and commit to the removal of the curb at the head of Dunton Court, both the restrictive declaration and the HOA. I'm looking at it really quickly just before, because it turns out it was submitted to council but never submitted formally. And I do see that there is reference in the HOA to the maintenance of the street, but it doesn't say what street. I mean, what street? So it should say Dunton Court, that's the name of the street, so that everyone is clear about what's being maintained and that the utilities are the responsibility of Dunton Court homeowners, and so on. So I also directed the architect who appeared to have the clients who appeared. I instructed the architect to reach out to the client's lawyer, to reach out to the title company's counsel to do a search on the ownership of the roadbed. What we received instead was a set of architectural drawings that show compliance with flood regs, which all we wanted them to do was make sure that the datum was expressed in NAVD and above the design flood elevation, which they showed. But those drawings didn't include the full length of Dunton Court on the site plan, and they also show the street trees, grass, and planters forward of something called the prolongation line. I don't know what that is, because this is not a map street, so I don't know what the prolongation line is, but still within the property line of the development. So the HOA and the restrictive declaration needs to make clear what's the responsibility of the association, because they say they're going to be maintaining the street trees, but the street trees are in that same front yard as the front yard and the planter. Whose is that? And they don't mention that anywhere in the documents. There's also no drawing or anything in the HOA to make this clear. That would, and the restrictive declaration to make clear what's ours, what's the associations, what's the private property owners. And I think the other thing was, I believe the HOA was a little bit unclear about the city's involvement. The city has no involvement. So you can't say, other than the BSA with a restrictive declaration, the city has no official involvement, right? But it needs to be clear that this is emergency access to the houses. There's a lot that's unclear. So in response to doing a title search to really find out who owns this, there was a letter from someone at VP Abstract who says that 4 years ago, they, quote, ordered a title search. So then I don't really understand that, because it's the title company that does the title search. So you don't, if you order the title search, then you're not doing it yourself. And they were told it would be too expensive or difficult. Right? Title searches are expensive. This is a developer developing a lot of houses. Cost of doing business, you order the title search and the search gets done, right? And then there was a stray line about a filed map being unable to be located. I don't know what the filed map is, and they couldn't have looked very hard, because there's amazing records about Staten Island where you can find really the maps that go back to
This is Queens.
I'm sorry, this is about Queens, right? But there are amazing records of the city. You can go back to when it was farmland. You can go back to, it's it's not like this is the Wild West where people just claimed land and that was that. And I'd argue that even in the Wild West, you know who all the cattle ranchers were. So, so I'm just wondering though, what if they were to dedicate the Dunton Court to the city? Or what, because that's been something that was proposed, a deed of dedication. If nobody owns it, then nobody will mind when the property association like dedicates it or claims it for themselves. What if there was, I don't know how this really works, but there are things called quit claim deeds and also declaratory judgments where the court just decides, okay, nobody owns it, you own it. Because nobody, then they should do that, because it can't be that nobody owns it. So basically, very few, almost none of our questions were answered. And so in response to this, the owner, I don't know if the owner has been coming to any of these hearings, the owner must appear tomorrow. Because I don't think he or she realizes how long this has been going on and the reason it's been going on so long, which is the non-responsiveness of his or her representative. So, anybody else?
I still have a threshold issue with this. They haven't met the specific elements of the statute by showing hardship or practical difficulty complying with the statute, which would avail them to this exception.
So I think the main difference on this one compared to some of the other ones is, unfortunately, this Dunton Court exists, and there are many other houses on that street, some on the same side of the street as this development, and then many on the other side, where the board already granted GCL waiver on one development directly across the street that's made up almost of the same number of houses. And then in the kind of Wild West days, I guess the DOB granted access to houses that are a little further down. So the street itself is a wreck. Like I was looking at there's a Dunton Court Property Association rules and regulations that talks about how you have to maintain your sidewalks. Well, there's a section of Dunton Court where the property owner claimed the sidewalk as part of their backyard, so you actually don't have a sidewalk. So it's really, this is a particularly messy street, but that's one where I can see, you know, all the damage was done by predecessors, and so this wouldn't qualify under that GCL exception B or A.
Paragraph 3.
Paragraph 3.
It wouldn't, because there are other houses on the block that don't have COs?
I guess yeah, I don't think I think it's because they don't have COs, but also because Dunton Court doesn't meet the qualifications for dimensionally. So that's the other thing. So, but this is a situation, it may be that they have C of Os, because they do, actually, that development across the street, they have COs.
Oh, it's just the street doesn't meet
But
DOT standards.
I think it doesn't meet the standards, and so, and in fact, we required that for this development, they widen the street to 30 feet, because the street currently is only 20, so that wouldn't have met any standards for the exception on GCL 36.
Well, I understand, as a straight legal issue.
Yes,
For
they
us
should-
to have jurisdiction, they have to give us proof that, that there is that hardship. So on a strict legal interpretation of it, that's one part that I'm having difficulty with. And the latter part is the fact that this type of waiver has created issues in that very place is all the more reason to take this that is before us now with caution.
Item number 10, 2017-58A, 7 East 69th Street, Manhattan.
Okay. We didn't receive anything new from the fire department. I don't know whether they have anything new, because I don't know that anything new really was submitted. We asked them the appellant to brief better their case, and they provided a brief acknowledging that the 1968 building code required sprinkler alarms where there were more than 36 sprinkler heads, as in the instant case. So they agreed that with more than 36 heads, you needed a sprinkler alarm, okay. And the work in the building was in fact done under the 1968 building code. The applicant then cites to the 2014 code, which does not apparently require sprinkler alarms to be connected to a central station in 1 to 2 family dwellings. But the 2014 code doesn't apply to this building, which received a certificate of occupancy in 1996, showing that it would be equipped with automatic sprinkler system and smoke detectors. It did not state in the C of O that a fire alarm system was required or installed. And there's also provided by the appellant a 1992 fire department letter of approval showing that the sprinkler alarm was connected to a central office. So it's upon that basis that the 1996 C of O was issued. Fire department has a letter of approval, therefore the C of O can be issued. So, and if the 2014 code were to apply, as is suggested by the appellant, then the entire building would have to be brought up to 2014 code standards, which I dare say they don't want to get into because it's much stricter. And so all of this seems to be pretty straightforward, and fire department gave the owners the options for how to cure the problem, either remove the sprinklers entirely or connect the sprinkler system to an alarm, to a sprinkler alarm and central station. I just don't really see that they have a case. I think the reason that they keep trying to argue this is because they're trying to avoid the fines, right? And there was a criminal charge here, but I just don't see how we get around this. It seems very straightforward. Anybody else?
No, I agree with you. I think the reading seemed like they were focusing on one section of the code, but also which was applicable, like section 901.1.1 regarding the automatic sprinkler system. It says, while you don't need it for 1 and 2 family, but it also says the limited area of sprinkler system serving fewer than 20 sprinkler heads. And like, since it's more than that, then the other kicks in. And so it's like picking and choosing regulations, but I think it needs to be read in entirety and not in parts.
Right. So that's part of it. Once they chose to install it, once they
Right.
chose to have 36 or more heads, now they're into a sprinkler alarm system. They could have opted not to install it, so then that's the fire department's offer. Uninstall it, take it out. But you can't have this, we talked about this the last hearing, you can't have the sprinkler heads just sitting there and it doesn't work, because that gives the occupants the false sense of security, and then that's really scary and an uh-oh.
I had a question. What is a fire protection equipment? Because in the plan, the plan work that was approved dated 10/31/1990, it says sprinkler work type was submitted and for fire protection equipment automatic on entire floor. So I was just curious what that meant.
If they
per
referred
then
to,
code.
but if they referred to a section, did they refer to a section? Because I have.
I was looking
Is that
at
a defined term
these
in the-
sheets, the one that you're, the
It says.
plan work approval application, and in that, the applicant had checked off fire protection equipment automatic. That was checked up, and so was the
But-
sprinkler work type.
but
It
so-
didn't refer to any section.
No, so when you have a TR1 or PW1, you're filing it for the particular work. So if you file it for sprinkler work, which is different, you file a different one for fire alarm. If you file it for sprinkler work, that's the application, so that the fire alarm protection is the sprinkler alarm, right?
Okay.
So and there'd be a different PW1.
No,
If
there
it,
was only one.
no, but it
which
would
was
be
for-
another one if you were installing a fire alarm.
I see.
Right?
And
So
here they didn't have to.
they didn't do a fire alarm. And
But
it,
when you say they didn't, like they didn't have to, or they didn't, they should,
whether or
but
not,
didn't?
whether or not they had to, the C of O was very clear that they only had a sprinkler and no fire alarm. Right?
Yeah.
So, and we're not getting into whether they had to have a fire alarm, but that's the issue. And the fire department doesn't seem to be saying they need a fire alarm. They're saying they need, it showed, the PW1 showed, I'm sorry, the C of O showed smoke detectors and
Right.
sprinklers.
Right.
That's all. Right.
So I'm interested to hear a concise legal argument from the applicant. I was unsure what legal theory they were basing their argument, or really what their argument was here as to why an appeal should be granted.
Right.
And I'm looking forward to tomorrow. Perhaps you could shed some light on that for me.
I think what they're doing is they're playing 68 code against 2014 code. How come if it's not required today, it's not fair to require it before? It's actually not correct. It wasn't required before to have a one or two family house with sprinklers. But what's required is, once you exceed a certain number of sprinkler heads, you must have it on an alarm, right? Which is probably the same.
And when it's on your C of O and you're on your plan,
Yeah.
I just want to see what the, and while we're not, we don't have much say with the criminal complaint, that's a complete different issue, which,
Right. No, that would be, if we agreed with them, then they would take that to the
Right.
court, and the court would do whatever the court would do, but maybe not charge them.
Item number 11, 2017-276A, 96 Industrial Loop, Staten Island.
Okay, DEP had on July 3rd, had comments. I'm not sure if this is one of those impossible to respond to comments, but it says, "The applicant has submitted a copy of the recorded declaration of maintenance for the Arthur Kill Association. The internal water main and internal sewer drain will be maintained by the owners, members of Arthur Kill Association, and will not be maintained by the City of New York," which is the standard line for all of these GCL 36 waivers. But they say applicant must submit a copy of the final map of the City of New York and a copy of the certified site connection proposal showing how the internal sanitary drain is connected to the city sewer and storm water, will be discharged from the property, and will be maintained as per the site connection proposal. Applicant must submit an internal water main plan showing connection to the city water main, so that they're not finished with their review.
Excuse me. So the applicant approached me at the beginning of this review session and said that they submitted a site connection plan to DEP on July 20th, the engineer did, and they're waiting back for the certification.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Hold on one second. Okay. Okay.
You have more
Any other
comments?
comments? No. Sorry, I just needed to finish.
Item number 12, 2017-282A, 148 Sprague Avenue, Staten Island.
Okay, we asked for clarification on sort of the subdivision and so on. The revised site plan still doesn't make clear to me what the meets and bounds of the tax lots are and which parking space belongs to which lot. They provided a completely separate piece of paper they call the subdivision diagram, and that should appear on the site plan and also be attached to the restrictive declaration. And that diagram should label the two parcels as A and B, and with their tax lot numbers, it's kind of one document shows it this way, another document shows it this way, another shows it that way, so you can't follow along with the bouncing ball. I find that quite odd. We were provided with a builder's pavement plan for the private roadway that does have details to match DOT standards, so that's kind of a new idea that we get sort of what we call a private BBP, so it looks as much as we can like what the DOT would expect to see. With respect to the no parking that's required by the fire department, I'd like to know how the applicant proposes to avoid that parking with 3-car tandem parking system, and still answer the question, why can't parking spaces be provided that aren't tandem? These are very large lots. There's places to put parking. And that's something that the community board was concerned about. And I think with all of these tandem parking situations, you have to pull the car into the area that's forbidden to be parked in. I don't know how else you get to the car, especially when it's not your car. It's your neighbor's car. So with respect to the curb cuts, the notes state that the maximum curb cut width pursuant to section 25-632 is 18 feet, but the curb that accesses the driveway is 20 feet, so I don't understand how they're complying with that. A restrictive declaration was drafted, which obliges the owners of the subject properties to maintain the driveway and sewer lines and utilities. However, the utilities section should be revised, since this is a private drive, and it should not state the property owners will maintain it to the extent that they are not maintained by public utilities or municipal agencies. That's the whole point of these decks, to eliminate the confusion about who's responsible and not for everybody to say, the other guy's doing it. So they need to take that out, that the maintenance is the responsibility of the homeowners. They need to also eliminate the wording, quote, hereby declares an intent to file an easement declaration, and instead, which is for access, and replace that with the word shall file. But also, the easement is actually more than parking. It's a right-of-way, actually, to pass over the neighbor's lot and to park on the neighbor's property. That's stated later in this restrictive declaration, so I'm confused about whether that declaration is actually the easement. It's a little confusing. Yeah, go ahead.
That raised a question for me as to whether or not they're zoning compliant with regard to the side yard, if that yard is actually a street or parking.
So we asked them to look at the zoning with respect to open space. You're allowed to have a driveway
And
in a
parking.
side lot. They're not parking, though, in the driveway. So the drive is going down from the main street, and it goes down parallel with the side lot line, but to park, they actually turn into a
Okay.
sort of a lay-by zone. So it's not in the side lot. If anything, it's in the rear. It's in the open space between the two houses because it's in one, on one zoning lot. And then the parking, then the garage is also of the second house, the one at the rear, is in the side yard of that house.
And these per zoning are permitted obstructions.
Okay.
Right, we often see
We-
garages in side
Yeah.
yards.
And side yards like driveways, parking, these are permitted obstructions
But in that district, you're not allowed to park
You're not
in your
allowed to drive.
front yard.
in the front yard.
And
right.
because there's only one zoning lot, there's only one front yard where there isn't any
Just in the-
parking. They're actually pulling into a garage
In the behind.
front.
I see.
No, that house in the front has one garage spot,
Okay.
but then it needs two more spots. That's what it needs that's where it's driving down that right-of-way, because it doesn't own the land of the driveway. The other guy does, which I find also very confusing, but anyway.
But if that's the case, I can't see why they have to stay with tandem parking. It seems like there's a lot of space.
There is a lot of space, so, yeah, there is a lot of space. I don't understand that. It's a very generous lot where there's lots of places to put parking, so I don't actually get why they're doing it like that. And I could understand tandem for, say, 2 cars, because they're all related to one unit, because it's just 2 units. But, so they'd be related to one of the units. And so it's my car, my keys. But if there's, the third car is the one that's the problem, because that one has to move out and park in the fire department's turnaround area. Okay, and then the other thing is, in terms of the right-of-way, that's just so I thought that the restrictive declaration is really badly written. It seems like it was written right before they submitted it, and nobody proofed it or anything, because it has a lot of mistakes. But to be clear, the right-of-way is for the benefit of parcel B and burdens parcel A. But it reads in the restrictive declaration, it's reading like an easement for both B and A, which makes no sense. You can't grant an easement to yourself. I didn't understand, is there supposed to be some reciprocal right by parcel A to enter onto parcel B land, such as for those 2 parking spaces? So there are 2 parking spaces located on parcel B land. And so is the idea that maybe parcel A should have a right-of-way to park there sometimes, or to use it as a backup zone? It's very unclear. And I'd like to know also, I didn't find anywhere in the declaration that the right-of-way is accessible for emergency access by municipal authorities, or about no parking and no parking signs, since it's forbidden to park there, or about the requirement by the fire department to put a house number on the street for number 148. None of that appeared in the restrictive declaration. There's a diagram that's attached to the restrictive declaration that needs to be revised to clarify the lot lines of parcel A and parcel B, so as to be clear who owns what and where the parking spaces are that are assigned to each parcel. You actually don't know who's supposed to park in which spaces. They should also provide the access easement that's referred to in the restrictive declaration, unless they're going to be using the same declaration, which they might as well. But they need to say, we declare or let's say, we grant an easement to parcel B, right? That's how you do it, as opposed to talking about an easement that isn't present in that document. There's also a note on the drawing that's incorrect, given what it says in the restrictive declaration, and according to which refers to an HOA, which according to the applicant, there isn't an HOA, so it says, in the drawing, it says, a formal restrictive declaration will be filed. Declarations are recorded, not filed. The restrictive declaration shall cite the parking restrictions and will name the HOA as the entity that will be legally responsible for compliance. So that's an incorrect statement on their drawings. This is all about coordination, and I find it a very frustrating story when I'm the one coordinating the application. That's the job of the council and the architect. So, okay. Anybody else on this?
And while this is a smaller project, I still think that they have to meet that threshold, the threshold requirement of the statute, and list their particular hardship and why they cannot comply with the statute and need of the exception.
Okay. So just to clarify, the threshold is in GCL 36, there's a requirement that you argue that there's a hardship in complying in a, let's say, how does it read? That there's a hardship in...
No building should be, no construction should be built in the bed of an unmapped street.
No, not a bed of, no, without access to frontage.
Without access to frontage.
It says where the enforcement of the provisions of this section would entail practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship, and where the circumstances of the case do not require the structure to be related to existing or proposed streets or highways.
So to make that binding. That's what it says. Thank you.
So going forward, is this a new requirement?
Well,
in the
it's an
absence of-
ancient, it's not a new requirement, it's an ancient requirement, but we want it articulated in the hearings. Okay, it's a statutory.
It's a
requirement.
threshold. We don't have jurisdiction without it.
Okay.
Zoning calendar, decision items, item number 13, 2017-322BZ, 2259 Richmond Avenue, Staten Island.
So applicant did respond to the concerns that were expressed about traffic and provided utilization rates, because there was concern expressed by a neighbor about traffic. And they also provided a landscaping plan, but we had asked them to provide site lighting and light spread diagram, and they didn't do that. I didn't re-listen to the hearing, so I'm not sure if we had waived that, but normally we do ask for site lighting. And light spread's a concern when you've got residential adjacent, but we don't here. So that's less of a concern than that the site is lighted.
I know we did not have issue with the sound attenuation, but my
No.
note doesn't say anything about the lights, so.
Doesn't say that we didn't have an issue with lights.
I don't have a note on it.
I don't have anything in my
But we
notes.
did note that the residential is 130 feet
Yes,
from
from
the
this-
restaurant.
Right.
So,
Right, so we said, we said in general, we're not really concerned because there's not adjacencies to residential use, but I think lighting, we did ask for lighting and trash information and stuff like that. And
I thought that during the hearing, they expressed how the layout wouldn't affect the light, it wouldn't create a lighting issue on the last hearing, how the layout of the drive-through, but,
Okay, well, maybe
Yeah.
so it's pretty easy to throw some lights
Right.
on a drawing, so that would
Right,
be
we can
the
do that by
fastest way to do that. It's not so easy to take readings of the lighting, which we do on a lot of the gas stations, which are right next door to somebody's house, right? So that's a different thing.
We did get a letter from the opposition.
Oh.
That was, I think, on Friday. And the opposition did clarify that the reference to Staten Island FEIS was not to compare the Taco Bell to Staten Island Mall, but to cite the traffic counts and analysis presented in the IS. So I did look at the Staten Island FEIS, and I think we need to be very careful when we are comparing an enlargement of then Staten Island Mall of 426,000 plus square feet with 1,400 plus parking spaces to a Taco Bell that will generate at its peak 75 vehicles going in and out. And when you distribute it amongst that entire network, the additional vehicle that would get added to each one of those intersections will be insignificant and will not change the scale. Because I was looking at the level of service analysis that was done for the no build and the build, and even for such a large development,
No build and build for the shopping mall.
for the shopping mall. I was looking at the no build and to see how much of a deviation that had occurred from the no build to the no build to the build. And it was not that much. The level of service in most of the cases remained the same. In few cases, it did change to worse, but it really was not, it didn't change in all situations. So I just want us to be mindful of that.
yeah, I found the opposition's argument,
Say-
I found the
please speak up.
opposition's argument not to be in the best of faith, especially with regard to trip generation, that they tried to use the amount of traffic that would happen with the mall as an example, and that's what we heard during the hearing. So I'm really discounting that argument at this time.
Well, and we talked about also, which is what the applicant clarified, most of these are pass-bys, right? And so it's people, like, are you hungry? Let's just pull in here. It's not,
No one
let's go to Taco
drives,
Bell.
no one drives
Yeah.
5 miles to Taco Bell.
So, right, yeah,
I think that's what they said, right?
okay.
Okay.
Continued hearings, item number 14, 302-14BZ, 45-04 Francis Lewis Boulevard, Queens.
Okay. Very lots of notes. We do have a landscaping plan. The planting bed on the south property line, though, must be dimensioned to a minimum of 4 feet to allow for viability of those buffering shrubs that are so important to the adjacent property. There's no dimension there. And also, they need a planting bed detail showing the depth and curbs for all the planting beds. They didn't show any planting beds, they just show like the trees put in soil, like you're in the park. So that doesn't work. They did notice the finish material on the drawings. It's brick veneer, which I think is an appropriate material for this neighborhood. We still don't have calculations about the open space versus the parking and showing compliance with the zoning resolutions, that we need that. The zoning calculations sheet is also still incorrect, and I've asked them to revise it already, and they apparently revised it, but then I don't know what it is they revised, in that it doesn't show non-compliances. So then if you don't have any non-compliances, what are you at the BSA for? You have to show what it is. And the non-compliance specifically is with the maximum allowable floor area for this use. So you shouldn't cite to community facility use and say, we're complying. This particular use is limited to 1,500 square feet, right? And that, those changes could be made quickly if there's somebody listening.
I have to say the applicant has listened to all our concerns and they've been working towards this. We just need this.
Yes. So actually, Jella, if you could just, I don't know if someone's here from the applicant, if you could just give them a call and tell them what we wanted.
Okay. Item number 15, 178-15BZ, 99-47 Davenport Court, Queens.
So a fourth adjournment was requested, but in this case, I believe it's okay because it pertains to the ZRD1 for flood regulations, which may, in the end, obviate the need for the variance entirely. So I think we should give them a bit more time. But in fact, the last time we heard this was 1 year ago exactly. It's like happy anniversary. So this really should be the last adjournment. We'll give them a lot of time. And then, but otherwise, it means that they're not, for some reason, they're not getting their ducks in a row because they should have been asking the question a long time ago. Yeah, we heard this literally a year ago tomorrow. Okay.
Okay.
Item number 16, 190-15BZ, 5157 Carmine Street, Manhattan.
They requested an adjournment.
Item number 17, 2016, 4347BZ, 1605 Oriental Boulevard, Brooklyn.
Okay. The last time we heard this application was in January with 2 adjournments since. We had a lot of questions about the legality of the existing structure, which was enlarged without permits, and we had questions about compliance with flood regulations. We had asked that a ZRD1 and a CCD1 be filed to address these questions about flood regulations, but I don't see that much progress was made on that question. There's an argument in the statement of facts that the project complies with Appendix G and so on, or that the 2014 project that was done, let's say, not pursuant to permits but illegally, because other things weren't done according to the permits, didn't need to comply with Appendix G. The BSA stays out of this whole discussion. We don't make that call. That's for DOB, and that's why we need the ZRD1, CCD1. So I don't see any of the submissions addressing the legality of the existing construction work as compared to the approved DOB plans. The statement of facts tells a confusing story, but there's no mention of the fact that the 2013 survey initially submitted to us is different from the 2018 survey recently submitted. I'm reading from that illegal construction has been removed. I'm not 100% sure because I'm just reading, I'm just inferring. And the history on the site is really confusing, so we need something to establish that the non-complying side yards that they're really depending on here were legally constructed prior to 1961. There's been so many I don't know what's and I don't know what's that we need proof of that. With respect to the retention of 50% of the existing exterior walls at the exterior, I'm not seeing that. It looks like the entirety of the second floor walls are being removed. We also need to see retention of 50% of the floor joists, show that indicated on the plans. And then there's also no additional information that we requested to support the height and the rear yard incursion, which we discussed in January. The attic has an 11-foot floor-to-ceiling height, which can be brought down. The house is already very tall because it was lifted to 4 feet higher than required by Appendix G to 8 foot 4 inches above grade to the top of the first floor instead of what was required, which is, or the minimum required, which was 4.5 feet. With respect to the rear yard, and, by the way, you can't occupy that ground floor level, so it didn't need to be lifted to 8 foot 4 above grade. With respect to the rear yard incursion, the houses surrounding have complying rear yards, and judging by the layout of the attic floor, that level could be pulled back to create a balcony, which would be similar to the one in the front. So that way, architecturally, you've got a balcony in the front at the top level and a balcony at the rear at the top level. This is a modernist building, so we're not working with that same kind of gabled roofs and all that stuff. I think it's a simple architectural solution for that, which wouldn't affect the interior program. Any other comments on this one? Okay.
Item number 18, 2017-201BZ, 323 Elmwood Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay. According to the applicant, the address of the subject property should be amended on our materials to 319 Elmwood Avenue, so everybody make a note of that, okay? So in response to a lot of the conversation about too many drop-offs by parents picking up laundry and dropping off laundry, they put 8 laundry machines in the basement of the proposed building, and I hope now that they're going to have a class to teach the students how to use laundry machines. That should probably be a class taught every week. Until they get so good at it, they know when to add fabric softener. We asked that they provide a lesser variance with a 20-foot rear yard, and instead they did some calculations and provided a chart to show what the bed count loss would be as a result of the loss in floor area. Personally, never like responses that don't provide us with what we specifically asked for, because it doesn't allow the board to analyze the data. In this case, the floor plans. We specifically asked for a drawing to show it, because we said, you can turn the dorm rooms around, actually. And they're like, nah, you're chopping it off, we can't get any beds in there. And while it's true that the site backs up to a railway right-of-way, and a shallower rear yard would not impact the neighbors to the rear because it's the railway, nothing was mentioned of this tall wall and its impact on the neighbor to the side. Drawings would have helped us understand that. At the last hearing, we asked that the applicant provide us with a site plan showing the adjacent building, the bike racks at the subject building, and the access between the street, the bike racks, and the adjacent school building. I didn't find that anywhere. Bike parking, as was also expressed, is a major concern for the neighbors, that the bikes are like all over the place. There is bike parking shown in the cellar and in the rear of the subject building, but no direct connection to the neighbor shown, and really the bike parking is about the neighbor more than it's about this dormitory. The provided site plan, by the way, is tiny. It's minuscule in the upper right-hand corner of the kind of cover sheet, so you actually can't see anything unless you blow it up on your screen, which is not how drawings are reviewed by contractors. So they need to provide a full-page site plan and show the site improvements, including fencing. And maybe there's room actually for some landscaping, which would be a nice thing to do for adjoining property owners. There isn't any trash room in this building, and there was an argument at the last hearing that because they don't eat on site, they shouldn't have a trash room. Well, actually, people create trash whether or not they eat. And I dare say the kids will sneak food because no matter what, they're kids, people who get hungry in the middle of the night or whatever. And besides that, other things produce trash, whatever. So they need a trash room. But not to leaving for the best part for last, I'm actually really disturbed, borderline infuriated by the explanation for why the floor-to-floor heights can't be reduced to permit a 35-foot height to the roof. At the hearing, we reiterated over and over again, I listened to the hearing, that we wanted to have them bring the building down to a height of 35 feet to align with the neighbor. The architect represented that he would look at reducing the heights and explain that he is struggling with how to fit in the mechanical ductwork, and we discussed that the ductwork would be in soffits running along the demising walls. The architect did not mention anything about construction having already proceeded to a point of no return, or that it would continue to proceed that way, completely ignoring our concerns. Instead, we're provided with a photograph taken in mid-July, only 1 month after our hearing, showing that the first 2 floors are complete using high floor-to-floor heights. I'm curious, would photos taken today show that they're up to the 3rd floor? I wouldn't be a bit surprised. The neighbors, many neighbors came to this, they took a lot of effort to come to this hearing, right? And they were very frustrated with this property owner who has ignored all of their concerns on their other sites and didn't even attend the community board meeting because they felt like it was a waste of time. So they expressed to us concern about the size of the project and the intensity of this type of development in the area. And I have to say, based on what I just saw, this applicant doesn't care at all. So I say, why should we grant this applicant additional height if they hold the board and its neighbors in such disdain? I'm inclined to require a setback from the front at the top floor to compensate for the height that will exceed allowable plus a parapet, because they want to go to 37 feet to the roof, but then the parapet's another 3.5 feet. That's a 40-foot high, 40-foot 6-inch high apparent wall, right? And a setback will make it fit more within the neighborhood. The Department of Building approved plans are for a basement and first floor to 15-foot 7 inches above the rear and front yards. The photos show a 2-story structure that may well be over the 15-foot 7 inches high. According to the testimony of one neighbor at that last hearing, and she may have misunderstood what she heard, but the contractor said to her that if they are currently building more than what will be permitted, they'll just have to take it down. Maybe they should take it down. So, and it's not the first time we've asked for somebody who's building with impunity to take something down. The construction is block and metal deck construction that, in my experience, goes up a week per floor. That's the standard in the industry once you've got your foundations. So it can come down in a week and go up in a week at the correct heights. The revised drawings that were provided by the architect show the upper floors work at 9-foot 6 inches floor to floor. So he obviously figured out how to overcome the mechanical difficulties. And the lower floors can work like that just as well. So those are, for me, those are the choices. Either take it down or provide a setback at that top floor to comply with the area height limitations.
Well, and they should also explore the lesser variance scenario in the way we discussed it, with rearranging the layout of floors and not just chopping off the back, which I thought was the answer they gave because they had already constructed.
Right.
And didn't want to face possibly cutting off the rear 5 feet and then,
Right.
redoing everything. So, because that would mean not just the rear 5 feet, but then the whole layout of whatever they're doing inside would have to change. But they still should provide that exercise for us and then show us why it's not going to
Right.
be the minimal variance in terms of addressing their program issues. That's
Right.
what I think.
Right. So what I couldn't, it seems, what was very confusing about what I saw in the photograph was, I don't think they've built to the 15-foot rear yard, but because there's no tape measure, there was no way to tell that. Because it looks like the foundation comes out the extra 5 feet, and then the metal decks don't extend that far, and that the concrete block is like getting ready to receive, to key in with some more. But I'm not sure, they may have built to the 15 feet, which wouldn't surprise me a bit, but it's not like they showed us with a measuring tape, right? Right. But I mean, frankly, if what we were thinking of was they have these dorms that are running perpendicular to the back wall, you just switch them around so they're running parallel, and yeah, maybe you'll lose a few beds. You're not going to lose, as was the testimony, 40 beds, or I don't know what. You'll lose a few beds in each room. It's not that serious, and by the way, either you come here for a variance and you work with us and you make the argument and we respond to neighborhood concerns, et cetera, or you don't, and then you suffer the consequences. That's my feeling about it. So, any other comments?
I just want to be clear, the requirement is 20-foot rear yard.
Yes.
Item number 19, 2017-217BZ, 4855 Highland Boulevard, Staten Island.
They requested an adjournment.
Item number 20, 2017-267BZ,
Also requested an adjournment.
2017-291BZ.
Okay, that one should be in tandem with
Yeah,
the one.
call the next one.
Sorry,
92.
And number 22, 2017-292BZ, 1367 East 26th Street, Brooklyn, and 1363 East 26th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, so as it turns out, this property owner will buy the other side of the semi-detached home from his neighbor and combine the house into one. So that's the tandem that we're reading. This is, of course, an even better outcome for the architecture, since the modifications will read as a single building. We don't have to impose some sort of restrictive covenant on it to both do the work at the same time, et cetera. With respect to the threshold question, the existing walls are being retained, but it looks like the second floor joists are all new, so it is to increase the floor-to-ceiling heights at the first floor from 8 foot 9 inches to 10 feet. 50% of those existing floor joists at that floor have to be retained, but the existing joists can be raised to accomplish the added height. We do that frequently, right? So they have to show that on the drawings and the demolition plan and clarify where the joists are being retained.
Shouldn't they also show the demolition of that center wall? I don't think they show that on the
Oh.
proposed plans. I didn't see it.
Oh, right. And
So
that's
shouldn't it be like dashed?
Yeah, okay. That's interesting, because that's a party wall. I'm not sure how they actually remove the entirety of that wall.
But it
So-
looks like they did.
Yeah, because they're gonna, that's a big piece of steel that they're gonna have to put, it's carrying, so that's a very astute observation, because the joists are laid from party wall to outside wall, right? So it means they need a carrying beam to go all the way across to pick up all those joists, otherwise the whole place just falls down, right? So, yeah. So they should actually be showing the carrying steel that will pick up all those joists. And then they're going to need some columns that hold up the steel. It doesn't just like fly there, so. Okay. So I see on the demo drawings that, that they're relying entirely on the joist calculations on the first floor. But it's not really about joists per se, it's about floor area. And that whole concept of you take the walls away, and the floor area falls out the side, you take the floor away, and the floor area falls down, right? So you need floors and a wall to equal floor area. So if you're maintaining walls on the second floor, you have to maintain the joists. Even if you lift them up, they're still staying there as floor area as you raise them up. So the demo calculations need to be in linear footage. The demo calculations are done backwards in this case. What they're doing is they're taking the total existing linear footage, and then they're subtracting from it the linear footage to be demolished. That way, it's impossible to check the calculations. So instead, they should subtract from it the linear footage to remain, and then you should still get the right number, right? So the 50%. So there is an increase in height to the roof line of 35 feet above an open attic. This should be brought down to be more in line with the heights of the neighbors who are similar semi-detached at 30 feet. The earlier proposal didn't increase the floor-to-floor heights at all, or the perimeter wall height, the way this one does. And I get, now you have a house and you want to make it grander and all of that stuff, but it doesn't need to be 5 feet grander. And I understand that on a larger house, your roof line pitch necessarily has to go up a little bit, but it doesn't have to go up that much. It can be reduced down.
In the previous proposal, they were proposing a maximum height of 33 feet.
They were? Really?
Is that what you were referring to, that they should retain the previous height?
No, I'm not saying, well, I'm saying that in the previous one, they had something strange going on the roof that I didn't quite understand, which I asked, I think it was like a little walk around or something like that on the other one. Yeah, it's not really a widow's walk. It was like they were flattening the roof, and then there was this kind of little parapet thing, and the top of it was 10 foot 9. But all the other floors were the same. They remained as existing, right? And then I don't have a totaling of what that was. But this one, they're lifting the floors and creating a very high floor to peak. So all of that could be adjusted a little to be more consistent with the neighbors. And then I just think, so they're asking for 1.0 FAR, which is more than what we normally do in these areas. We cap it at 1. So I think with playing around a little bit with the attic line, they'll be able to reduce it down to an even 1.
Okay. Okay. Item number 23, 2018-41BZ, 1238 East 29th Street, Brooklyn.
Oh, oops.
This is going to be withdrawn. Oh, okay, the
What?
other one is
No.
going to be withdrawn, right?
Yeah, right, the other one will be withdrawn once they file as a single building, right? Because at the moment, they're in contract, I don't think.
26th
Yeah,
Street?
sorry, right.
Oh, the comment.
So this one, the requested modifications were made to the attic level at the rear. And this way, the extension into the rear yard will not be nearly as large as was originally proposed, so I think it's more sensitive to the neighbors.
Zoning calendar, new cases. Item number 1, 2017-321BZ, 560 West 33rd Street, Manhattan.
Okay, we have proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board recommends approval. We have Department of Investigation sign-off. But there's this outdoor terrace with a swimming pool. The terrace isn't really a terrace, that's kind of a misnomer. It's the roof of the 4th floor. That's proposed. It's a big wraparound outdoor PCE. So there are additional findings, and I don't know that the PCE actually meets them because one of them says that such use shall be located on a roof not less than 23 feet above curb level. Uh-oh. So it's a nice idea, but I don't think it's allowed. And I don't think there's anything we can do about it. So, and, roof would be allowed, rooftop would be allowed if it were at 23 feet in this zoning district, because we've seen them also where it's the wrong zoning district and we can't do anything.
I haven't read the special purpose Hudson Yards districts. I'm just wondering, is there anything in there?
I didn't have a chance to
I
look.
didn't read it, but I'm just.
That would be for the applicant if they know of any sections to
Yeah,
bring to
exactly.
our
right.
attention.
But that they mentioned not at all anything in their statement of facts that this is an outdoor terrace. I mean, they mentioned this outdoor terrace and then ignored it, and maybe by calling it a terrace, they think it's not the same as a roof, but you can't have a terrace without a roof. This is the way it is.
And it's a pretty active use because there's
Very.
an outdoor swimming pool
Yeah.
and
Yeah, oh,
lounging
yeah.
areas, and they don't address lighting or noise or anything
No.
either.
I mean, this is a extremely busy office district, so it's actually a great use for this. You probably would have a view of the river from your
This
swimming
isn't
pool.
going to be also residential? I thought
Oh,
this
that's
was
true, there is, I don't know about in the
residential.
building, but in the building
This
is
surrounding.
residential?
I
I
think
thought this
the
building is residential, like starting up around 7 maybe
Yeah.
or something.
Oh, okay. Mixed use, well, yeah, that's true. Mixed use.
But the surrounding, you're right, the surrounding uses.
Is this a proposed PCE or is it?
It's
Proposed.
This
proposed,
is
it's under
proposed, the
construction.
building's
Thank you.
under
This is in
construction.
Hudson Yards, it's all of the buildings. are-
Okay.
Okay, item number 2, 2018-4BZ, 2213 East 13th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, we have proof of service of the initial application to officials and proof of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board recommends approval with 2 opposed. I just want to note there's a typo in the statement of facts with respect to the depth of the side yards, which should read 3 foot 2.5 inches and 3 foot 5.25 inches. They should provide a copy of the rear driveway easement, which is not available on Acris because it's still LIBOR and page number, which is really back in the day. Since this is only a 1-story existing building, there are no plans. There are no plans to demolish it, so, and the expansion is the rear and above. There is proposed a 25-foot deep rear yard due to a driveway easement that forces a bit more depth in order to get both an 18-foot parking space plus the easement into the rear of the property. So luckily, there's an easement. That's why it's more of a rear yard. I think the requested floor area is high for the study area and high for the other special permits granted within it. Some of that floor area is located in the attic, and some is because the side yards are so narrow. So they should reduce the requested floor area, which is again probably playing with the attic heights. And also if the attic is only partially occupiable, which is the case, why on earth is the roof line of the entire building so high? It's an enormous roof over an attic that has hardly any usable space. And in terms of neighborhood character, when I started reviewing this by looking at the existing building plans, I looked at that streetscape drawing that showed the existing drawing and was shocked to see the contrast between the little row of one-story houses that this house is one of and the 2.5-story house at the corner at number 2201, which is 30 foot 6 inches high at the peak. And I lamented, oh, that's probably because it's a BSA case. But then I see this proposal, which is 5 feet taller than that, and no reason for it to be 5 foot taller than that. So they really need to be more, let's say, sensitive. And it's true that it's not only little one-story houses on the block, but they haven't made a case for being this tall, and it's taller than its immediate neighbor that's tall. So, anybody else?
Couple of corrections. The statement on page 4 states maximum permitted FAR is 0.75. think they need to be clear that with attic, 0.9 FAR is permitted because that is stated in the zoning chart. And also the floor area in the statement of fact and the zoning chart and the plan, they don't correspond, so just need to match them all and make sure all the numbers correspond throughout all the documents.
Which we shouldn't be doing, the applicant should be doing. Okay.
Item number 3, 2018-7BZ, 291 Avenue W, Brooklyn.
Okay, we have proof of service of the initial application to officials and proof of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board recommends approval with 3 opposed. We have 1 letter of objection citing concerns about congestion. I didn't quite understand the comments from that objection because they said it's 3 to 4, but I didn't know 3 to 4 what.
Yeah, I read it as 3 to 4 family. They're saying it's converting from 1 and 2 families to 3 to 4, which is adding to congestion. But this project is going to be a
one-
single family and it's just going to be enlarged, so.
Right, I didn't understand. Yeah, maybe he's commenting about a different project or misunderstands this project. They should show that the 4-foot 5-inch incursion into the front yard is a legal non-complying condition. And then I have similar question as in the prior application. If only the central dormer portion of the attic is occupiable space for bedrooms, why does the roof line have to be so tall? The house towers over its immediate neighbors and appears to be very tall generally in the neighborhood. And we weren't provided with any information on the subject, so I'm just going on what I can see. I think this is a very aggressive building on this block because the site is larger than most of the sites in the area, and also because the building is occupying so much of the site because it has undersized front, side, and proposed rear yards. Though it may be in line FAR-wise with many of the other lots, those lots are half the width of this one, so the floor area is likely much greater than the norm in the area. And with respect to lot coverage, this lot has a little tail onto the side street that enables the coverage to remain lower, but that sort of skews, because the tail is atypical of these lots that are always rectangles, simple rectangles. So it's kind of artificially skewing the lot coverage calculations. I think the house is too much and needs to be scaled back by a lot.
I had a question, and that is with regards to the fact, understanding that the site is irregular, and the straight line, we have accepted straight line extension of the side yard, but in this case, the side yard narrows out in the rear. The side yard width narrows out from, I can't read the plan.
Oh,
I think in the, it's probably 3 feet in the front and it narrows out to 1 foot, 4 inches. So
Oh.
the extension in the rear, granted, the abutting building has a garage in the rear. Shouldn't the extension in the rear where the pinch happens maintain at a minimum at least the existing non-conforming, or it should be a straight line extension? That's the question I have.
or it
I
can
don't
be at
know.
an angle, you know? Nobody
Yeah.
says you can't build a building at an angle.
My question is it permitted to allow a straight line extension
To reduce?
to reduce the side yard?
Oh, I see what's
because
going-
of the
the
fact that
neighbor.
the side yard is reduced at that length?
But the
That's my
side yard,
question.
oh, that's so interesting. The side yard is reduced as to the neighbor.
But
I think it should be, you're always holding the 3-foot whatever, right? The side yard width is 3 feet. That's your side yard width.
so that needs to be maintained.
And that means they have to cut that back. Yeah, that's a good point. Because the whole idea is the distance between the two buildings.
Though this is a
Not-
garage, so I just want to be clear that I believe this section of the building is garage. So you are required to maintain a minimum of 8 feet from a residential building,
Right.
not a garage.
But that's their lot line, so you measure, a side yard is a side yard, no matter what.
No,
Yeah.
true, but I'm reading the regulation, it says that distance of 8 feet.
Yeah,
is-
no, independent of that, but a
Okay.
side yard's a side yard. It seems to me, if it's a 3-foot side yard, that's what you get. a
Okay,
3-foot
that's
side
what
yard.
I wasn't clear of,
Yeah.
and that's a question I had.
No more comments?
Okay.
Item number 4, 2018-29BZ, 1637 Madison Place, Brooklyn.
This is a 73.
Sorry, in the previous one, a survey was not provided.
Oh, yes, sir.
I think there was a survey, actually.
I didn't see it in the file, maybe in the updated folder they have?
I can check and email.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
okay. Sorry, can you
Repeat,
say,
yeah,
read
can you call it
the
again?
Madison?
Item number 4, 2018-29BZ.
1637 Madison
Oh,
Ave,
I'm
Madison
sorry,
Place.
1637 Madison Place, Brooklyn.
Right. We have proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board recommends approval with 3 opposed. We have 3 letters in support. The statement of facts didn't go through any of the section 73-03 findings, which is a requirement of all special permits. This is a minor enlargement compared to what we normally see from the 73-622s and even from the 73-621s, because there's usually some attic action that goes on. But it would have been so nice if the addition related architecturally to the existing house. I know, I'm so fussy. But I would, so architecturally, it's just not a very nice solution. I would like to see the floor area calculation drawings to show that the additional floor area is not exceeding the maximum allowable. So here, the maximum we're allowed to grant on anything is 10% in either direction, right? So they need to show that that they've measured all of that the floor area calculations are done using drawings and measuring them, and then show us, so what's allowed to the maximum as of right, and then show us where that 10% increase is. Ditto for lot coverage, ditto for open space, okay? Because that's really critical, and it's hard to follow when it's so generally described. Anybody else on this one?
Item number 5, 2018-62BZ, 73-77 Sands Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, we have proof of service of initial application to officials and proof of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board Land Use Committee and its Executive Committee, on behalf of the full board, recommended approval, but not very many people, 7 in favor, 2 abstentions. Am I right?
And
Yeah,
the
2
executive-
abstentions. What?
Right, and then the executive committee also.
That-
That's
I
what you
said
said.
that, I said that. The minutes cite concerns about traffic and noise from the Manhattan Bridge, and they're right to note that because, wow, is it noisy there. So this is a school, that's super noisy there. As a threshold matter, the applicant provided a very detailed description of the curriculum and their New York State Board of Regents charter to show that it meets the ZR 1210 definition of school. The applicant also provided a list of the 17 other sites they looked at that were in districts where the use would have been conforming, but none of these satisfied their programmatic or locational needs. The first floor plan wasn't clear at all about elevator banks in this building. They only showed 1 elevator bank, and this is a large building, so there might be more than 1 lobby. So I didn't understand, is this a shared lobby with all of the WeWork people who are renting the rest of the building, or even maybe own the rest of the building? It appears that separation of 1,000 students from unrelated adults using the building is by escorts to the elevators and key cards to the second floor. Did you want to say something, Veronica?
Yes, and the applicant said that they've been developing an operation plan outlining the separation of the students, and the school will also have representatives that tomorrow's here to discuss it.
Yeah, we really need to talk about this in detail. So, So, from that, I don't see actually how this works when you have hundreds of other people working in the building. And a WeWork means you don't even know what the hours are, right? It's whatever it is, because I'm renting office space. I go when I have work. So, and my question is, because we see that with actually a lot of the yeshivas, where they use the staircase that goes directly from the outside right up to the school. So I look at it, it's like, why can't they just use stair B directly from the street? And then there's this elevator number 4, which is probably the service elevator, and just use that when necessary for disabled and other kinds of access by students, because faculty, I'm not concerned how faculty go. But, and with elevator 4, maybe there's a way to create a corridor that takes you directly to elevator 4 from the street. And you don't need to go into the main lobby, because that's the problem. The statement of fact says that the students will be taken by elevator only to the second floor, and then use the internal stair to the upper floors. The plans don't really support that. The plans show that reception for the high school is on the 3rd floor. So that statement doesn't really make sense in the light of the reception for high school. And there isn't really like a lobby area on the 2nd floor where you would get the kids coming up in groups I don't even know how they do this, because school starts at whatever time it starts. Don't all the middle school kids come at the same time, or don't they, or how's it work?
It just does not sound like it would ever work, and it doesn't make sense, because if you're only taking the elevator up to the 2nd floor, just walk.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's not like they're taking it up to the 6th floor. They still have to get off. And like you said, the bulk of the students are coming at the same time,
Right.
which is usually right before the bell.
Right.
I mean, if you
Yeah,
ever see how a
exactly.
junior high school or high school works, that's when everybody decides to get into the building. If you get there early, you're hanging out outside of the building. You're not really going into the building until 1 second before that bell rings, and then everybody's going to bum rush the elevators, which makes absolutely no sense. It would take about a half an hour to get everybody to the 2nd floor.
I even 1,000 kids, way more than a half an hour. That is some elevator. Also, same point is, where do the middle school children eat? So the high school has a cafeteria that, by the way, only fits 210 people. So does that mean the kids in the middle school eat in the high school level? That would go over big. But that means there's going to be 5 shifts for breakfast, because they serve breakfast and lunch. And then the other thing is, there's a very small food prep area, so that implies to me that there's catering. They didn't talk about that at all. And if there's not catering, then the food prep area is far too small, because I just don't see how you serve 1,000 kids anything in that area. And then they didn't talk about trash. Is the trash handled by the building? So in other words, the building's management takes the trash and deals with it? Or is the school responsible for its own pickup? In which case, is that Department of Sanitation, or is that a private carter? And in either case, where's the trash go?
It says there'll be pickup daily in the evening, which lead me to believe it was some kind of private,
Private carter.
situation.
But
It'll-
who's in charge,
Right,
right?
no, I agree. It also says the food delivery is every day at 5 a.m., which leads me to believe it's prepared food that's going to be like stored and just warmed up. you know?
Right, right. So how does that work? I mean,
Yeah.
there is a truck dock, so arguably the food could come in by truck dock at 5 a.m., but they didn't explain any
Right.
of this.
So the DOT comment did talk about loading and unloading, and that there will be a coordination of the loading and unloading with the arrival and departure of the students to minimize conflict. So I was wondering if that loading and unloading was related to the food catering.
Maybe, but there's also, this building is
businesses in the building.
enormous.
There's
Right,
other
that's what
uses,
I
that
would
is
think
true.
they were talking
Yeah, so
about.
they're going to be receiving deliveries of paper and WeWork does full service, it's pretty great there. There's all kinds of refreshments and all that. They're delivering lots and lots of stuff all day long at this enormous building. So, and also, they said that there's a no stopping zone on Sand Street. So, I didn't understand then where the drop-off area was for the students. It says 3% of the students and some of the faculty will be dropped off. So where does that happen? You can't use a no stopping zone for your drop-off. It's called no stopping.
Right, because that's the other approach to the Brooklyn Bridge.
Right,
So
right.
it's definitely not a place where we
Yeah,
can stop.
no, downright hazardous. Also, DOT had specific concerns with respect to crossings, and theirs was more about the conflict between the entry and the loading dock, and they asked that these be included as conditions. And I'm trying to imagine, what kind of conditions can you include? The student, because loading, again, this is a big office building that's going to be receiving deliveries at all different times. So what are you supposed to say, that the WeWork or whatever can't receive deliveries between the hours of X and X to avoid the conflict with the students? I just don't understand how that's going to work. Noting, of course, that this is a 192,000 square foot building. That's a lot of people in this building. Then DEP did sign off for hazmat, LPC signed off for archaeology and architectural significance, and DEP had noise and air quality questions as of July 30th and August 8th, which I can either read or we talk about tomorrow, or Tracy can talk about them. The noise studies show that the window walls all need attenuation, which anybody who's just walked down the street realizes, and I have been in apartments that are right opposite the bridge, and it's amazing. If you open the window, since construction must be nearly complete in order for them to actually have an August occupancy, they need to provide the specs on the windows that were actually used and photos to show compliance with the seeker environmental consultant recommendations based on the mock-up rooms and details that were provided in the drawings. So they show a lot of detail in the drawings, but they need to show that they actually installed that. And those are my comments. Anybody further comments?
I had the same comment with the lobby space, whether that's going to be shared, and if there will be dedicated elevator. I had a question with regards to the space that's on the 12th floor. A portion of the 12th floor is also going to be used by the school. It wasn't clear whether that was going to be exclusively for the faculty or for both students and faculty. And if it is students also, then the question of that separation needs to be clear, because then there's a common corridor that is being used to access that space from any of the elevator banks. So I would put that clarification.
Sounds more like they're going to have the students walk down J Street to their other facility for other school activities, not use the 12th floor. That sounds more like
It was administrative conference room.
Yeah.
Right, it wasn't clear to me, so if that can be clarified, and then in a note, maybe in the plan, that so we know that's only for faculty, and that addresses
Yeah.
that concern.
Okay.
Item number 6, 268-.
Oh, wait.
Oh,
We have a note that says DOT has issued a draft sign-off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hopefully hear a final one by tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay.
The applicant agreed to those conditions in the draft sign.
Okay.
Okay.
So the conditions are that they have to ensure that students can exit the site safely. The school staff would be stationed outside of the building during arrival and dismissal. That's normal. And they talk about the truck delivery and the loading dock and how they're going to coordinate that. I don't know. Yeah. Okay.
Item number 6, 268-14BZ, 231-06, 10 Northern Boulevard, Queens.
We have proof of service of initial application to officials and proof of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board recommends conditional approval with 27 in favor and 9 opposed. The conditions are parking lot gates must be secured when the premises is closed. The area at the front shall be landscaped. The dumpsters shall be placed in the rear of the property, and the establishment shall close no later than 2 a.m. The record does not include all of the board actions, but in defense of the record. So this is a really ancient application that has gone through lots of different reviews by different project managers and so on. And so a lot of the materials that were initially provided didn't show up in the SharePoint folder. So if I'm complaining about the record, it's because I didn't find it yet. It may be in there, okay? So, go ahead, you want to?
There were 2 resolutions for 2 separate lots in the commissioner's public hearing folder.
Right, but so I'm going back to further. So it doesn't include all the board actions on the gas station site that was the recipient of variances for automotive repair use in 1929 and 1964. So the only one that we got was for 1971, and then we got the variance for the restaurant side, right, which is much late, 96 or something. We also need the approved plans for both sites and photographs to establish that the existing restaurant site complies with conditions. And again, if these were submitted a long time ago, apologies. We need to sort of dig those up if they were submitted, or if not, we need them. So approved plans for both sites. This is a proposal to enlarge the zoning lot of this post-61 variant site by 18,733 square feet to incorporate a former gas station site that had been the subject of a variance, but the right to that use lapsed in about 2014. Bless you. And to expand the use group 6 eating, drinking establishment onto the gas station lot. Interestingly, by this merger, some of the criteria that the board relied on for uniqueness on the restaurant lot was cured, right? By the zoning lot merger, for example, it's no longer an irregular lot.
With insufficient frontage.
Exactly, so that part's cured. Arguably, new criteria is added with respect to the gas station lot having to do with environmental contamination and history of uses. That's arguably the trade-off for having cured some of the hardship. The site is near tidal wetlands, but I don't know that that's, in this location, that's a unique condition. Likewise for the high water table and the need for stormwater management systems. Being on a busy roadway is not unique, since all of the properties on Northern Boulevard front a busy roadway, although it's true that by virtue of all of these legal nonconformities and longstanding BSA actions, much of Northern Boulevard became de facto commercial, and the zoning map has insistently never caught up to that fact, which I find shocking. The now demolished existing building on the gas station site cannot be considered as obsolete and a hardship, since it's not there, so you can't talk about it being obsolete. And stating that the site doesn't have an existing building to convert to another commercial use is self-created because you tore it down. So you need to eliminate some of these hardship arguments. With respect to the AE flood zone, which requires an elevation 13-foot lift, a ZRD1 and CCD1 appears to have been prepared but not filed or approved, so we need that, even though it's commercial use. With respect to stormwater management, there's a statement that if the gas station site were a standalone, stormwater could be treated in retention tanks on site and then released into Alley Pond Park. And then the overflow beyond the retention tanks and the treatment tanks just flows directly into the park. I don't understand why that would be allowed, especially from a contaminated site. I don't understand any of this. In any event, why would a new connection to the existing 54-inch storm sewer have been needed? Didn't the gas station connect to that sewer already, and aren't there existing connections that remain? And since both properties are owned by the same owner anyway, independent of whether they merged the lot or they have two separate uses or whatever, And no scenario assumes a different owner, which would make no sense. Why can't the stormwater already be transported by drainage pipes onto the restaurant property, regardless of whether it's the same use or a zoning lot? And then I'm very concerned about the last sentence in the consulting engineer's letter that states, and perhaps I'm misunderstanding it, that residential use would have obliged the developer to, quote, construct standard DEC stormwater quality control structures which filter runoff to an acceptable water quality level prior to discharge to the wetlands. Is there a different water quality level when it's commercial than when it's residential, discharging into the wetlands? I find that extremely upsetting, that would be the case. And the proposal adds a lot of impermeable surfaces to the site. Would permeable systems improve the stormwater drainage situation? Does the parking lot meet zoning requirements for layouts and planting? And note that the 2010 resolution for the restaurant had opposition from neighbors and officials concerned about this exact same subject, stormwater runoff to Alley Pond Park. And a condition of approval was obtaining required tidal wetland permits, which were in fact obtained. But it's unknown whether the permit work was completed, so we need confirmation that work was completed. With respect to occupancy of the restaurant, we need the combined total rated occupancies and proposed occupancies at each floor for the proposed and existing uses, including for the roof garden. And we probably need a noise study for the roof garden. I don't know whether Alley Pond Park is considered a sensitive receptor, because I don't know if there's like picnic tables nearby or anything like that.
No, just grasslands.
Okay, so
Actually, that section of Alley Pond, I'm not sure if
I saw,
it's much accessible. The other side has the golf lane.
right,
The side behind the building, I'm not sure if it's actually, it may have like wild paths, but not an active space.
all right, so, but that's a DEC
Yeah.
or DEP call about how the noise study is done?
And probably for parks,
Oh.
since it's a,
Yeah.
did parks sign off on it?
I think we had it for noise because there was
No receptors.
no receptors.
Okay.
Okay, but so maybe just check.
We
what
did
is-
send it to Parks for Natural Resources.
Oh, you did?
Okay,
Okay.
great.
Okay, hold on a second.
And Shadow.
In Shadow?
Oh, great.
To Parks for Natural Resources and Shadows. Okay. But were they aware of the outdoor use? Yeah, okay. Sorry, just, okay. And with respect to planting, we need details on the width and depth and curb conditions of the planting beds, and DEC review of this as a buffering mechanism for Alley Pond Park. Because that's part of it, like, I would think that planting on the site would be beneficial for Alley Pond Park and would improve the stormwater conditions. That's because it's permeable. If it's properly detailed, it's permeable.
I know it was a question the first go-round. The neighbors were concerned about flooding in the parking lot due to non-permeable surfaces
Right.
and the way it slopes.
It slopes towards Alley Pond.
I think it
Yeah.
does, but they
Because
were
Northern Boulevard
concerned,
is
right,
higher,
about the
right?
collection in
Yes.
the corners of the lots. That I remember the neighbors talking about a lot.
And interestingly, we have another site that's adjacent or sort of catty corner to Alley Pond Park, and there's been real big problems in the road bed right in front of Alley Pond because it pools there, right? And then it overflows. There's a little retaining wall at Alley Pond, and it overflows and pools. So that there is actually this big issue about retention, water retention. So the traffic study needs to be also reviewed by DOT. I think it's still open. And although the parking proposed to be provided exceeds the zoning requirements, a demand study should be done as well. I didn't see if one was done. Demand study.
I think, I think in the DOT, yes, it does say that it only on a particular day, I think Saturday peak or something like that, where I have it in the note, where there would be a little bit of an overflow, but they would be able to contain it within the site.
They would,
That's what
with valet
with valet
parking, yeah. But I just didn't know if it was based on a demand study, like how they came to that conclusion. So we also must have, of course, a DEC tidal wetlands review. And I saw there was an application submitted to us in July. It was submitted to us. I don't know if DEC received the tidal wetlands
I think
application.
that's for a copy of it. I don't know.
Okay. And then DEC's comments from 2015, because this application has been around for a long time, which I have pasted here. There was also a July 25th, 2018 submission of the EAS. So we're waiting for DEC comments on that. DEC has signed off. No, I'm asking if DEC signed off on the spill closure and groundwater monitoring reports that were prepared by Advanced Cleanup Technology in 2016 and 2017. And those are my comments. Others?
I had comments specifically with regards to the plan. In the plan, they do show that 19 spaces, and it wasn't clear if that's going to serve as reservoir spaces and only during spillover that would serve as the additional parking spaces. I mean, and the reason for asking for the reservoir, we just need to make sure there's enough. Because this is going to be valet parking during certain peak periods, vehicles will be coming in and parking somewhere. So the plan needs to identify where that hold-up area is going to be before the valet parks them.
The holding areas.
Those, yeah, sorry, the holding area, not hold-up area. Holding area.
Your money or your life, right?
And where will the drop-off and the pickup be happening during the peak period? Peak period, this is to ensure that there won't be any vehicles backing up on Northern Boulevard.
So, I have a number of financial questions, so I'll just go through them. The first one has to do with the site value and the way in which this site value was calculated. The site value for 3 of the scenarios is based on R1 zoning, and for the final scenario is based on the existing gasoline building plus the existing restaurant building. So, first off, in the statement of facts and findings, they do talk about how they are not going to include cleanup costs in the valuation scenarios. However, this is my question, and I would love it to be addressed tomorrow. If you're valuing the site based on R1-2 land, that's residentially zoned land. That's land that is clean. And so therefore, the value is kind of including cleanup costs because it's the value of a clean site. And so my question is that driving up the site value? And I asked that question, what clued me into that is they had a scenario that was an existing gas station retail scenario, which was basically sales of gas station sites, active gas station sites. That actually provided for a lower site value than the residential. And I was trying to figure out reasons why. And then it occurred to me that R1-2 land is actually clean land. Gas station land is not clean land. So that's a question, and we might have to proceed differently in terms of valuing the site. We might have to start from a different point. And I guess when we have the conversation, that'll kind of inform which way we need to go. But my suggestion is that we probably should value the site of the property as if it's an abandoned gas station, and use sales of abandoned gas stations with basic building demolition costs to get rid of the building, or use the active gas station sales that were given, but reduce the sales price more than they have already reduced it to account for the existing business. Because right now, they're only taking 5% off for the existing business, and I think that an existing viable business is a larger portion of the sales price than they're accounting for. And then add the basic demo costs to that. Now, for the proposed, they could still use the existing restaurant based on the restaurant sales for the site value. And then they should go back and build out every scenario as if the building is new. That brings up another issue, which is what to do with the existing retail scenario. Since there's no longer a building on the site, there is no existing retail scenario, because there isn't a developer in this world who's going to take 18,000 square feet of land and put a 3,000 square foot building on it. So it's really a waste of time, and we really don't even need to see that under this scenario.
So the scenario, which one is that, though?
That's the
that can't be-
existing retail building that's being, the existing gas station building that's being converted to retail. It's like 3,333
Right.
square feet. The building isn't there. So
Right.
it's kind of like a theoretical
Right.
kind of
That
thing.
makes no sense.
It
Right.
makes absolutely no
That's
sense.
to support
It's
the
like-
obsolete business
Right.
building argument. It's not an
Which it
obsolete
isn't,
building.
because
It's
it
gone.
doesn't
Yeah,
exist. So
okay.
therefore, why waste our time even looking at that? Likewise, I think that the community facility scenario really doesn't have to be further examined, because it is unlikely that anybody would commission a building here when they don't know what the user is, and the user possibilities are so reduced in this area. And also, it's $24 a square foot, and with retail, you get double that, basically. It just doesn't make sense to sit there and keep looking at it. So now that that's out of the way, I wanted to also talk about the construction costs, starting with the special costs. The special cost for all scenarios seems to be the same, 1.5 something million dollars. And it's not really addressed that this is the same even though the building footprint changes in each scenario and the use changes in the various scenarios, and yet everything is the same. And there's no narrative or explanation as to why it would stay the same. So that's a question I have that they should address. And then I have a question about the construction costs, the regular basic construction costs. I'm talking specifically at the proposed. The proposed is adding 15,834 square feet of restaurant space. The basic construction costs are $8.3 million. If you're going to divide that by the additional space, you're getting a very high number of $524 a square foot for construction costs, which leads me to think that this $8.299 million is actually addressing more than just the new construction costs for the new building. And if it is addressing the existing building and any renovation that's going on, it really needs to come out of this scenario. I'm not saying that they can't perform a renovation when they actually are building out this site, but we shouldn't be thinking about it, because the building is not obsolete. The building actually underwent a great renovation about 8 years ago, and there's no conversation about why this building is lacking as a restaurant. So therefore, that should be on them, so to speak. So that should come out of the equation, and that will lower those development costs.
Can I ask a question? So let's say hypothetically, as part of this enlargement, if the exit routes and others change and requires changes in the sprinkler and the fire things that affects the existing building, should the cost then be included or not included?
I don't know, because one could say that you are enlarging the building. That's your choice. That's your solution. And why should we then be including amplified construction costs for an option that you're talking about? It's kind of like self-created, and it's driving the scenario.
Variance, yeah.
So then I also had a question about those construction costs for the proposed when looking at the plans. I'm not understanding why you need to dig a whole proposed pit for plumbing that is almost as large as the existing cellar that you have. When you're enlarging the restaurant, it's going to be the same restaurant, so why do you need a whole new plumbing thing that's digging up this earth, which has all of these contamination and water flow issues? I'm wondering if that's also driving the costs here. So that's another question. As to the retail leases and the restaurant leases, neither of them have adjustments upwards for the subject site's on-site parking. So they need to look at that and reanalyze that. And now, based on the conversation we have about the site value as well as the construction costs, there may be a need for a lesser variance scenario in terms of reducing the footprint of the restaurant. But at this point, I'm not quite sure.
Thanks. Any other comment? No? Great.
I just want to say one thing. I am assuming that Commissioner Nasser has loads
Yeah.
of questions.
Yeah, I do
Because
too.
none of us have mentioned any of his
Uh-huh.
questions, but I just wanted to put it out there for him.
Okay.
Item number 7, 231-15BZ, 5278 Post Road, the Bronx.
That this needs to be postponed because notice wasn't proper.
Yes, and we've received a lot of objection forms for this, so people might show up.
So then we'll hear the testimony if people come, because what can we do? But it wasn't properly noticed. It's a little ironic if there's a lot of objection forms and it wasn't proper notice. It still wasn't within the 20 days.
It wasn't within
That was
20
the problem.
days, yeah.
I think it was only 15 or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
This concludes the public review session for August 13th, 2018.
Thank you.